Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra, and as always, my friends, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. My friends, I have to speak to you about something. We're going to be showing you a clip of what has been going on around the nation, including, yes, here in the state of Vermont, with regards to this drag queen re-education, perverse indoctrination that's going on with our children. Unfortunately, we were unable to broadcast this to you, but what I would like everyone to do if you have internet access is please go on the internet and just punch in drag queens in public schools or drag queens in public libraries and watch not only what's going on with the children, but watch the parents that are happily bringing their children into this evil, sick venue. So I want to make sure that we understand this, because as much as we like to present this to you, we were unable to due to some technical things. So I just want to make sure that you understand, my friends, what is going on in this high cost, force of a gun, take your property away, tax bills that we get, and where your money is going. And understand, this is all part of usurping the minds and the very souls of our children into a level of depravity and satanic worship that even me, who's been studying these people since 1978, I don't get shocked anymore, but I am shocked at what is going on. Not that the school system would allow it. The school system is all about dumbing the kids down, as we know from the Frankfurt School. It's all about creating confusion in curriculum, as we know from the Frankfurt School. But what really shocks me is that parents are willingly and happily bringing their kids into this environment. It's just unbelievable. Okay, enough on that. Let's read a couple of quotes to you prior to us getting started here. Now, this is Aldous Huxley from 1931. The perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls, in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where, through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitudes. Folks, think of this quote. And what, as a society, besides being dumbed down, ignorant, and apathetic, how did we get to that point? Because we base our value, we base our public perception on the toys that we have, and also we are completely entertained, either whether it's sports or whether it's the music industry or whatever. We are completely entertained, and we are really consumed on consumption. We base how people look at us and value us by the toys that we present to them that are ours, which, as we know from watching this program, are really not ours. Okay. Now, with that being said, we're going to continue our Senate Document 93-549, but before we do that, I got to do a little bit of housekeeping. And I want to speak to Joe B. I don't want to say his last name. I do not have permission to. But Joe, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for your interest, not only in this program, but your interest and desire for knowledge. Jamie did get your emails to me, and I am just so thankful that you have the interest and got out of the point of being apathetic and really caring about our republic. And you go on to say that I discovered the show a few months ago and can't stop listening. Anyways, from all I've listened to, you know the republic was finally lost with the Act of 1871, and the cabal whacked Lincoln before he could reestablish it. The Union was saved, but the republic was not. I absolutely agree with you, Joe, and we've covered this for many shows. And because we get so many new viewers weekly, that I am going to have to go back and rehearse and review some of these, like the Organic Act of 1871, which you speak of, because a lot of people would say, what's he talking about, 1871? Last week I mentioned the two U.S. constitutions, the Constitution for the United States and the Constitution of the United States. Two separate documents. How come it's not taught in our public school system that there are two constitutions to the United States? What is the United States and all that? We're going to have to start getting back into that. But what's been taking place, my friends, is that there's so many events happening on a daily basis that I find myself trying to keep up with the events that are all tied in to these people who have become rulers of us all. But Joe B., I want to thank you so much for your dedication to truth and knowledge, and also for making contact with us. Thank you so much. Okay, let us go forward with a couple of things I want to get into, because this all comes down to how it all started, my friends. It was the control of the issuance of the currency. Neither paper currency nor deposits have value as commodities. Intrinsically, a dollar bill is just a piece of paper, and deposits are mere book entries. And this is from the Money Mechanics Workbook from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago in 1975. Now, my friends, we did a complete show on this document. We did a show completely on this document, okay? And what they're telling you here is that there is no intrinsic valued commodity backing up our money, because we don't have money anymore. We have Federal Reserve notes. Money, according to Black's Law Dictionary, does not encompass debt. What is a note? An acknowledgement of debt, okay? So our money, neither paper, which is paper currency, nor deposits have value as commodities. Intrinsically, a dollar bill, not a dollar bill. Why they call it a dollar bill? What is a bill? It's a debt owed. It's just a piece of paper. Deposits are merely book entries. Now, the Money Mechanics Workbook, my friends, was the workbook that the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago put together to teach the hierarchy of the up-and-coming banking industry exactly how the lack of money system works. And that's what they're telling their students, that we have no intrinsically backed value in our money, which is not money by any law dictionary, but we always go by Black's Fourth because that's what the Supreme Court uses. Let us continue. I have never seen more senators express discontent with their jobs. I think the major cause is that deep down in our hearts, we have been accomplices in doing something terrible and unforgivable to our wonderful country. Deep down in our heart, we know that we have given our children a legacy of bankruptcy. We have defrauded our country to get ourselves elected. That's John Danforth, who was a former representative from Missouri. Excuse me, a former senator, my apologies. So understand what he's saying. They knew what they were doing the whole time, and they continue to do it today, except not just get themselves elected, now they get very rich. For example, Nancy Pelosi, she's worth $208 million. That we know of. She gets paid $170,000 a year as Speaker of the House. How do you get worth $208 million when you're making $170,000 a year? And that's what we know of, friends. Let us continue. Now, listen to these words. Basically, I messed up here. Basically, this is taken from the Civil Servant's Yearbook, The Organizer, in 1934. And be conscientious of the year. It's 1934. What happened on March 9th, 1933? And we've gone over it 1,000,000 times. Well, not 1,000,000, but you know what I'm saying. We've gone over it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Listen to what this document says. Capital must protect itself in every way. That's the bankers, folks. Capital, that's the bankers. Debt must be collected and loans and mortgages foreclosed as soon as possible. When through a process of law, the common people have lost their homes, they will be more tractable and more easily governed by the strong arm of that law applied by the central power of leading financiers. People without homes will not quarrel with their leaders. This is well known among the principal men now engaged in forming an imperialism of capitalism to govern the world, not just the country, the world. By dividing people, we can get them to expend their energies in fighting over questions of no importance to us except as teachers of the common herd. Civil Service Yearbook, The Organizer, January 1934. So who are you? You're part of the common herd. We are. Okay. Let's go from another one, real quick. The economic crash of 1929, the Great Depression, were caused by the money vultures and foreign swindlers of the Federal Reserve without holding currency from circulation and raising interest rates and an inflationary easy money policy in the 1920s. The Federal Reserve's fear of excessive speculation led it into a far too deflationary policy in the late 1920s, destroying the village in order to save it. Okay, I am going to stop here for the sake of time. Now, let's have a couple of more quotes here. Louis T. McFadden, one of the heroes of our country, and he was murdered by the bankers on their third attempt, and he was chairman of the Banking and Currency Committee. He did all he could to warn and educate the American people. They had to shut him out. This is Louis T. McFadden. It was carefully contrived occurrence. He's talking about the meeting at Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve Act. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair, 1929 Great Depression, so that they might emerge the rulers of us all. And they have. They have become rulers of us all. Barry Goldwater, presidential candidate, tried to warn the American people. Most Americans have no understanding of the operation of the international money lenders. The accounts of the Federal Reserve System have never been audited. It operates outside the control of Congress and manipulates the credit of the United States. Folks, what was it Rothschild said? Give me control of a nation's currency, I care not who makes its laws. This is how they took over control of the United States, and this is also, my friends, through the issuance of the currency, this is also how they have controlled every entity that the government is now involved with. You have to understand, my friends, that in 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was put into play, the government had very, very limited powers domestically. Very limited. And one of the things they did in 1933 is they expanded not only the centralization of power in the executive branch, which is what Senate Document 93-549 that we're reviewing is all about, but they also started creating all these alphabet agencies to get involved domestically, because after all, the Constitution says the federal government can only be involved in enclaves, territories, and districts, not in the states. So one of the things they did with language on March 9th, 1933, is they created districts of fill in the name. There is a district of Vermont. There is a district of Rhode Island. There is a district of fill in the name. And one of the other things they did, through the Lieber Codes of 1871, when the Organic Act of 1871 made the United States government's corporations. And now the government consists of about 35, and we read this to you verbatim from the congressional record, the government consists of about 35,000 corporations. USA Incorporated, District of Vermont Incorporated, State of Vermont Incorporated. Fill in the town, Water Department Incorporated. There's about fill in the town Police Department Incorporated. Fill in the state police Incorporated. There is no more laissez-faire capitalism going on in this country. Everything, this is how we went from a common law system to a law mercantile commercial law system. This is how we went from a foreign British guild called the Bar Association, British Accreditation Registry, taking over control of our law system. That was all done with the Lieber Codes with regards to the law system back in 1871. And we have broke down the Lieber Codes written by Francis Lieber and his committee. And also on that date in 1871, my friends, the Organic Act of 1871 was put into play and incorporated the government. And it's that insolvent corporation on March 9, 1933 that became insolvent to the international bankers through the use of the currency and controlling the issuance of the currency. Okay, so where were we? Where were we, my friends, is we're going to, why hasn't the press covered all this? Okay? Here's why. John Swinton. The business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, and to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of mammon, to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are the jumping jacks, they pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, and our lives are all the property of other men. We, talking about the media, are intellectual prostitutes. So you may say, okay, that quote says 1880, that's actually 1924. He was involved with the press up to 1880, and he retired in 1924. So has anything changed since then? Is the press still lying, vilifying, destroying the truth, lying outright, perverting? Are they still fawning at the feet of mammon? Let's find out. Project Veritas, James O'Keefe organization, this week broke an incredible hot mic video from an ABC reporter named Amy Robach. Now, folks, I do not watch the mainstream media. The only time I possibly will, and I'm talking for a short time, is to see what road and where they want to take the people, the sheeple, as they call us. That's the only time. But this video about a subject matter which perverts, destroys, blackmails our leaders, and perverts and destroys children. The media knew all about it, and yet covered it up. You don't believe me? Well, let's listen to Amy Robach from ABC News. Bill, if we could, let's please roll that video.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. Do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. Because he made his whole living blackmailing people. There were a lot of men in those planes, a lot of men who visited that island, a lot of powerful men who came into that apartment.
My friends, that's her words, not mine. That is her. She didn't know she was being recorded, obviously. She was frustrated that all this was coming out, and now it's coming out without her getting the glory of breaking the story from all that hard investigative work she did. Why? Because her editors, who answer to the other men, as John Swinton put it, wouldn't allow it. Why? Because as she said to you, between the island and the apartment, very powerful men went there. And they are just the bishops in the night on the board. That's all they are. They're powerful to us because we see them as they have all the control and power. But these powerful men, you have to understand that we think are it. All they are, my friends, are intellectual prostitutes, destroying children, selling their country, their race, their souls for profit and control and power. So think about this. We think we're looking at the top tier of power, not knowing there's another tier above them that is controlling who we think is the power. We are going to get into, right now, the DFBA. If you can see this graph here. The DFBA stands for Defense Forensic and Biometric Agency. And I'm going to read verbatim to you from a presentation put on by a gentleman named Glenn Krizay, and that's K-R-I-Z-A. DEFBA. The Defense Forensic and Biometric Agency will oversee the database known officially as ABIS, and that stands for Automated Biometric Information System. It allows to flag individuals of interest, putting them on a biometrically enabled watch list, or the BEWL, B-E-W-L. Once flagged, individuals can be identified through surveillance systems on all battlefields. Why would they say all battlefields? Well, you're saying, well, gee, Tom, the United States isn't a battlefield. I got nothing to worry about. You're wrong. Because the NDAA, National Defense Act of 2012, declared the United States what? We read it to you verbatim. A battlefield. Let us continue. ABIS is connected to the FBI biometric database, which is in turn connected to the databases used by state and local law enforcement. Can you say fusion centers, which every state in the country has? Most states have multiple of them. Ties into the biometric database on all citizens and non-citizens. Currently working on with Department of Homeland Security biometric database. This is just unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. The presentation earlier this year at a closed-door meeting of the Biometric Conference as Identity Management Symposium. So all these agencies had this Identity Management Symposium behind closed doors. So was any of your non-representing representatives there? No. When they say closed door, that's a politically correct way of saying keeping you the hell out from knowing about it. Now, I looked up some federal records, on the procurement records, and the U.S. military invested $345 million in the last 10 years in this, and most of it, my friends, went to a company called Leidos, which is a defense contractor. And this defense contractor focuses on information technology. And their quote is, "Focusing on information technology in a war without borders." Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because we certainly don't have any borders in this country, do we? Or defined lines of battle. So they're saying in a war without battles, or defined lines of battle, knowing who the enemy is essential. Well, I can tell you who the enemy is because it's in the congressional record, my friends. What is the definition of enemy with the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1933? March 9th, 1933. Why does that date constantly come up? March 9th, 1933. Because that's when the Solvent Corporation, USA Incorporated, went insolvent to the bankers. That's when they took everything over. As Louis T. McFadden demonstrated, to become rulers of us all. So who is the enemy? The definition of enemy from the March 9th, 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act is, and I quote verbatim from the act, from the congressional record, from the legislative page, the definition of enemy is citizens of the United States or those under the jurisdiction of the United States. And as this document says right here, the biometric database on all citizens and non-citizens. So citizens are citizens of the United States have been declared the enemy of the United States in their own writing. And non-citizens, those under the jurisdiction thereof. Are you with me? In a war without borders or defined lines of battle. Well, we do have supposed borders. They're not in effect in law enforcement or politically. I mean, after all, depending who you read, between 1.1 and 4.2 million illegal aliens came to this country in the borders, in our supposed border this year, in 2018. The most ever in recorded history of this country. And we're giving them bus tickets and setting them up throughout the country. Look what's going on in Maine. From the election of this past Tuesday, a Muslim got elected in Maine. Folks, Maine is turning into Mogadishu from all the Somalian Muslim illegal immigrants that have purposely been placed in Maine. Never mind what's going on in Minnesota, Michigan, other states. Let us continue. And while we're talking about enemy, on the DHS terrorist watch list, who is the number one threat according to the DHS, Department of Homeland Security? Who's the number one threat, folks? We read it to you. We showed it to you. Veterans. Not Al-Qaeda, not ISIS. After all, we funded, trained, and supplied, according to Major General Michael Flynn, who was in charge, who was the commander of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, who had all this information brought to him. And he told the American people that the Obama administration founded, funded, trained, and supplied ISIS. And then they changed the name to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda. Are you with me? Now, knowing who the enemy is essential. They have let us know who their enemy is, and it's us. And look what they're doing. They're doing everything they can to destroy us. A neurotoxin in the water, cancer agents in the vaccines, and many other neurotoxins in the vaccines. GMO food that we don't have the right to know what's in it. A pharmaceutical industry with cancer rates through the roof, autism through the roof, all because of what we're taking in. Chemtrails in the air with barium, aluminum dioxides, weather wars, destroying our food supply, which we've been talking about recently. Folks, all this are things that you do to stifle and or defeat an enemy. And I use the word stifle because have you seen what California's doing? Even with all their fires and all their emergencies they're having, they're shutting down the ham radio relay towers in California. Actually, they have shut them down. Now, you would think with all these fires, especially the ones in 2017, how ham radio operators were so instrumental in giving people updates where the fires were, where they were going. The ham radio operators of California set up their own safety communications network that the state was not providing to the people. The state of California has shut that down, my friends. And next is the CB radio operators. So, what does that do to our 3 C's of warfare? Command, control, communications. When you study the 3 C's of warfare, you understand that they're all interlinked. And if you do not have communications, you do not have control. And if you do not have control, you certainly do not have command. Now, from this report, I took some quotes that I wanted to go through with you. And during this Glenn Krize, it's Kriza, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, presentation, he said, a large and growing network of surveillance systems operated by the United States military and present anywhere in the United States has deployed troops vacuuming up biometric data on millions of unsuspecting individuals. Are you reading here? Are you listening to what I'm telling you? Let's get some other quotes from this presentation. It allows us to decide and act with greater focus and, if needed, lethality. What is lethality? That is the ability to kill, the ability to destroy, to destruct, to vanquish. Lethality. A lethal weapon. It means it has the ability to kill. Let's get another quote here. We are not wandering in the dark. We know who people are and what they have done and are doing. Land of the free? You know what's even funnier? Home of the brave. Listen to that quote. We are not wandering in the dark. We know who people are and what they have done and what they are doing. Look at this chart here, my friends. And I'm not going to get into this whole thing, but I just want you to look at some things. The theater, the international borders, and Kaunas military post, maritime domain, national border, military installations, insider threat. So the theater it's all militarized. You see the soldiers there. Or you never know. That could be your local police force, which has been completely militarized. Remember you know how they sold SWAT? You know how they sold SWAT? They had a TV program called SWAT. And it said, and it was for entertainment purposes only, ha ha ha. And they said, when you need help, you call the police. When the police need help, they call SWAT. Oh, we need more of that. What did Obama say about our domestic police forces? They need to be militarized. They need to be able to carry out the same missions as our military does abroad. And look what they've done. Not only do they have sniper teams, they got full assault teams. And it's, why aren't the police locking up all the pedophilia? Why aren't they locking up the bankers who did the biggest banking heist in the history of man? And I speak of the Federal Reserve Board, because they take their orders indirectly from the Federal Reserve Board. Because it's the bankers who give the orders, who get it down to the meons, to the peons. Let's continue here. International borders and Canis military post. Now, we just read to you that this is all interlinked with the FBI and the local and state fusion centers. We just read that to you verbatim from their own presentation. You can consolidate all that, my friends, under a military program. Maritime domain, land or sea, or anything above, it don't matter. National border, isn't that something? Isn't that funny? I just reported to you that depending on what agency you read, we've had between 1.1 and 4.2 million illegal aliens come to this country, which that's what they're willing to admit to, or maybe that they know of. And they're being placed here through our tax dollars. Just like our children are being indoctrinated into Satanism, and they're creating confusion through the curriculum in schools at a very high cost to you and I. The kids can't count change back. They have no social skills. They can't read. But boy, they can push buttons, and boy, they can dress up like drag queens. But you can't pray and speak about Jesus Christ. Military installations. Folks, look at the icon at the top of military installations. In case you can't see it, I'll tell you what it is. It's a police cruiser. Do you know why they used to call them cop cars? You know why they're cruisers now? Because a cruiser is a vehicle of warfare. There are a classification of ships called cruisers. They are military, naval vessels of war. And they're not peace officers anymore, are they? Or even police officers anymore, are they? No, they're law enforcement. Law enforcement. And look at the insider threat. Do you see any people with bomb vests on? No. Do you see anybody with military hardware on them? Guns, backpacks, boots, helmets? No. What you see is civilian attire. Because after all, my friends, the real threat to the government is you and I educating ourselves and waking up. You know, in the Marine Corps, they teach a thing called ODA, O-D-A-A. And I'm here to tell you that if the American people ever get into a stage of ODA, that's their biggest fear. Because if we observe and then we decide upon our observations, and then we act upon our decisions from our observations, I think they'd have a real problem on their hands, wouldn't they? So, my friends, we're going to continue watching this program, and I have spent much too much time on this, but I want you to understand how important this is and how this does tie in to Senate Document 93-549. And old Mr. Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister for Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich, propaganda works best when those who are being manipulated are confident that they are acting on their own free will. That is so important to understand. Okay, let us continue. And I've taken much too much time. But folks, you know, I'm not complaining, but it's very difficult. There's so much to cover in a short hour period. There's just not enough time to cover all the aspects and all the events that are going on and how they're all tied into these international bankers, how they manipulate every aspect of our lives, but yet we don't know we're being manipulated. And as Mr. Goebbels presented to us, we truly believe we're acting on our own free will when all we are Pavlov's dogs, responding to the stimuli and the shock testing and the indoctrination that the controllers that we don't see are implementing through the powers that we think are to be. So, I'm going to have to skip all that. And let's get right down to the nuts and bolts here. This is from Senate Document 93-549, 93rd Congress, first session. My friends, this is from 1973. A first and necessary step was to bring about the body of statutes, commercial law, which had been passed by Congress, conferring extraordinary powers upon the executive branch in times of national emergency. Well, what does this document tell us? What does this document tell us? It tells us that, quote unquote, such March 9th, 1933, there's that date again, my friends. March 9th, 1933. That's when it all changed. That's when we lost our country because of the Civil War, and then 1871, the Lieber Codes, the new Constitution, all that. And then we started losing more of it when the bankers in 1933, December 23rd, 1933, when the Congress was away for the Christmas break, they implemented the Federal Reserve, written behind closed doors at a secret place owned by J.P. Morgan on Jekyll Island, Georgia. That's right, folks. The Federal Reserve Act was not written by your non-representing representatives in the halls of Congress. It was written behind closed doors secretly to usurp the power of the Treasury of the United States. And they not only usurped the power, they wound up usurping all the intrinsic value. All of it, including you and I personally. They made us corporate artificial entities, and we became the co-surety to that debt through an instrument called the birth certificate. What's a certificate, my friends? A negotiable instrument, bearer use of. Someone is allowing you to use something of value. You have a record of birth. That record of birth goes to the health department. But you also have a birth certificate. That goes to the Office of Risk Management. Most Americans never heard that. Why is it you've never, all the agencies out there, how is it you've never heard of the Office of Risk Management? Because that's where the bonds are kept. And from there, they go to the Department of Commerce. What is the Department of Commerce? Financial transactions of value. And then it goes from there up the hedge pen to the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. This is how we became the co-surety to the facade debt. Let us continue. This is the forward to Special Committee on the Termination of National Emergency. So, and there's some real crooks on here, folks. When you read these names, you're like, man. I mean, Claiborne Pell from Rhode Island not only was a pedophile, a known pedophile. He was one of the biggest crooks ever to come out of Rhode Island, and folks, that is a high barometer, let me tell you. He's almost there with Nelson Aldrich, a senator from Rhode Island who was the liaison between the bankers to create, manage, and implement the Federal Reserve Act and even the meeting at Jekyll Island, Georgia. Let us continue. Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. In fact, there are now in effect 4 presidential proclamations of emergency. Under the powers delegated by the, okay, let me back up. These proclamations give force to over 470 provisions of federal law. Now, can you say Executive Order 13603, which we read to you many, many times in this program? Because that just consolidates these 470 provisions of federal law. But in this act to terminate national emergency, these proclamations gave force to 470 provisions of law. So what did these 470 provisions collectively transfer and or delegate new power to the executive branch? And this is why they hate and have to get rid of Trump at all costs, because they consolidated all this power through the use of national declarations of emergency to consolidate it, and Congress delegate it to the executive branch, because it's easier to control one entity than 535 fools. Do you know what a Congress is? Do you know what a Congress is? A Congress, look this up, a Congress is a group of baboons. Like a flock is a group of ducks or geese or chickens. A Congress is a group of baboons. So what did these 470 collectively proclamations give to the executive branch? I'm reading this verbatim. Under these powers delegated by these statutes, the president may seize power, organize and control the means of all production, seize all commodities, assign military forces, institute martial law, seize and control all transportations, seize and control all communications, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all Americans. Their words, not mine. Now, they did this through declaring emergency powers, okay? So what I want to do, folks, is I want to read to you the limited emergency. Now, this is this gentleman right here. His name, okay, is Rexford G. Tugwell, and he was a brain trust of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the biggest criminals ever to be president, okay? Someone who should have been arrested was FDR, because he was aiding and abetting the biggest heist in the history of American finance, economic history. Now listen to Mr. Tugwell's description in the manner in which Roosevelt used declarations of different decrees of emergency. Now, my friends, this is from the congressional record. This is from Senate document 93-549. Mr. Tugwell. The limited emergency was a creature of Roosevelt's imagination, used to make it seem that he was doing less than he was. He did not want to create any more furor than was necessary. The qualifying objective had no limiting force. It was purely for public effect. But the finding that an emergency existed opened a whole armory of powers to the commander-in-chief, far more than Wilson had had. It was what? The limited emergency was what? A creature of Roosevelt's imagination. In other words, it was one big stinking pile of bull dung. It was a facade. And from that, we lost all of our property, gold, silver. We lost our money system. We lost our court system. We lost everything. through what? A creature of Roosevelt's imagination. More deception for the people to swallow. My friends, we are always very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, obtain knowledge, and manifest kindness to your fellow man. But we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility, and we thank you.
Got to read between the lines.